Okay, now we focus more on this project and this particular topic. So basically, this project is funded by Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, with a grant of 3 million, and for 2 years duration. And these are our international academic partners. So we are India, and we have Malaysian partners, Professor Marlina and Siti, and then from Thailand we have Professor Nitin and Dr. Sahid. And we also have 3 research fellows and 9 undergraduate students who are into this project with us in our team. So what are the main objectives of this project? So we have classified entire project into 3 major objectives. The first one is to investigate the behavior and impact of geomagnetic storms on GNSS. So we'll see what is the geomagnetic storms and all. And to evaluate GPS positioning error on L1 band. Basically we are more concentrated on L1 band only. And then to model a near real-time tech mapping across the region. So this is our first indigenous development of tech mapping in Asian region. No one has done so far in this area. So our team will be the first one to map entire Asian. Then we have 3 international partners, and we have 10 annual trip to foster cross-boundary research. So in this way, we are also involving space agencies from all the 3 countries and also airport authorities from those countries too. So these are the major project stakeholders we have. So this is International Civil Aviation Organization, to whom we will submit our reports to. And then Airport Authority of India, JISDA is the space agency of Thailand. Then Indian Institute of Geomagnetism, which we will meet when our partners will come in April to India. Then AOT, and on Monday I met with Malaysian Space Agency people, then ISRO, and then AFR. Okay, so coming back to some scientific story. I am not a science fellow anyways, so I am from engineering background, electronics and communication. But we'll have a little background. So why we are worried about ionosphere? What makes us to research about ionosphere? So the primary source of ionization in Earth's atmosphere is because of solar ray radiation. I know all of us know, because the entire planetary system, space planetary system, is governed by sun. Is the only boss, right? So this boss releases some kind of solar flare, solar storms onto our space environment, which in turn affects the entire planetary systems. So solar events like solar storms can damage critical infrastructure like power grid and satellites on the Earth. So if you want to, do you believe with me or no? It can damage power grids or satellite. Yeah, actually I am going to present another slide where we will show you the history of storms, where these cases have happened in our history of mankind. Then also, it can disrupt satellite communication with ground receivers, and this has happened many times. Even if there is some extreme event, even it has knocked out the satellites, it has fallen onto the Earth, there are some events. And these ion can cause GPS systems, errors in the GPS system, which are used extensively in variety of applications. So history, as I told you, so we have in 1903, so wherein Western Union telegraph system were totally affected, and transatlantic cables were also affected during a severe storm that time. And also we have blackout. So this is the major event, which we say cubic blackout, which has knocked out the power grid, serving more than 6 million consumers in less than 2 minutes. That's a huge impact. Solar flares and solar storms can do a big havoc to our humankind. And then we have extensive satellite problems were reported, including the loss of 450 million. So this is a satellite, rays of satellite from US, and a huge solar storm has impacted just over 19 hours after leaving the sun. So ultimately, what leads us to do a research? We need to monitor the activity over the sun, how the solar surface is behaving, what kind of storms are erupting from the surface. Can we monitor it? The biggest challenge is no. The answer is no. Why? Because Earth is here, Sun is here, and Earth itself is revolving, and we can't have a planetary at one location which can keep on monitoring the Sun. So this is the biggest challenge what we are facing now. And in 2006, satellite to ground communications of this GPS was disrupted for about 10 to 10 minutes. So these are the extensive issues where we are facing due to presence of solar storms and flares. Then yeah, so most important thing why we are so the ultimate effects can be GPS positioning error, radiation effects on aircraft avionics, damage to satellite electronics. Solar storms can power distribution systems, leaving millions without electricity. So out of all these issues, we thought we should focus on one major issue. It is on GPS positioning error. May I know why we need to focus more on GPS positioning errors? So you all agree we are so much reliant on GPS sensors in our smartphones, because if you want to travel from one location to another, like you want to travel to KL, immediately you will open your Google map and then you will try to see. So your locational information is so important in real-time applications. So we'll talk more about global navigation satellite system, because we understand GNS has become so much integrated to our life. We are totally reliable on them. So most of the developed countries like US, Russia, and Europe, China, and Japan, and this is Indian. So they have launched their satellites to give regional navigation support to their people. And today, whatever GPS signal we are using in the world across the globe, that is because of GPS, US, which is launched by USA. And do you know why GPS was invented? Any idea why we need to invent GPS? Any idea why GPS was invented?
For remote sensing? Because we need to know the position.
Yeah, exactly, right? We wanted to know the location, we wanted to know the position. But why? Why we wanted to know the location? Exactly, it is what the answer I was expecting. You know, the idea was to bombard a particular location. During World War II, there was no technology where I can hit a particular platform.
Hidden purpose.
Yes, so for that purpose, military US Department of Defense wanted to invent a technology which can give me exact or precise lat-long location where I can hit from a particular location from their base station. So this is the reason why they invented lat-long. You know, just imagine in 1950s or before World War time, how flights used to travel from one location to another without having GPS. Can you just imagine, today's all civil aviation, all flights can safely travel because of GPS, right? Because they know which direction they are moving, which location they are moving by having their own GPS receivers on board. But just imagine an era when we don't have GPS. So all agree? So we invented GPS for defense, for military application. But today, the dependency on GPS has become so much more than defense. So we'll see that. So okay, these are the altitudes at which each of these countries have launched their satellites and in which orbital planes they have orbited. So if you can see, yeah, so there is so much of application dependent on GPS locations, right? So have you seen such tractor somewhere? Can you name this company? Have you seen so? Tractors are there in Malaysia or no? There are? Any idea which company it can? Have you heard about John Deere? John Deere? US company John Deere. Yeah, okay. The idea is what they have invented is you can just give you a precise location of the land, of the agriculture land, and it will automatically plow for you. It will harvest, it will seed. So everything can be done in automated mode. So that is possible because we have DGPS receiver here, through which we can map the entire agriculture plot. And say if you are mountaineering at some particular altitude in the White Ocean, so White Ocean is mountains actually, so then you need to know your own location where you are heading. Also for civil aviation purposes. And okay, in India, what we have recently started is even we can track our trains. So if you want to board a particular train, so you can sit at home and you can see which exact location the train has come. Accordingly, you can start from your home. So in this way, you can even track your trains. And Grab, I think you all know. So you all are using Grab taxi. Yes. Yes. No. Yes. No. Yes. Okay. And then this is a watch where you can even map and you can navigate using a watch. And this is one of the handheld GPS device which is mostly or extensively used on data collection, field data collection. If you are a survey engineer or if you are from remote sensing or GIS where you go for field data collection, so we usually get our point data through devices. And also, like if you are in a vessel in a sea, then you need to depend on GPS. And this is how the navigation boards of the recent automobile industry have launched. And in the world, there are two major companies who are mapping, who are using or who are extensively into mapping industry. They are. Have you seen this logo somewhere? Google, right? Yeah, Google. And this is the second industry, TomTom. Okay. So as of now, you can understand this very clearly. So there are two mapping giants in the world. One is Google, and another one is TomTom. And all other small companies utilizes these Google APIs or TomTom APIs for their maps or their applications in their phone or in their devices. So all of you use Google or TomTom? Google and Waze. Okay. So if you are using iPhone maps are from TomTom. Yes. So ultimately you are either you have only two maps option in the world. Either you will be using Google or you will be using TomTom. If you are using Uber, then they're TomTom maps. Okay. And Grab, I think it is Google. I think I didn't check. Okay, so you understood, right? So it started for a military purpose, which is just 1% now, and all remaining 99% of the GPS applications are in commercial angle. Basically, so vessel voyage, tracking, manufacturing, aviation, handle, surveying, car navigation, GIS. So you can just imagine how GNSS has impacted our lives. So although it was invented for military, there is only 1% application now. So then we all agree GPS is important for us. Yes. Yeah. And we all are so much dependent on GPS. Yes. Yes. But there are some issues wherein a GPS signal can even undergo some errors. So it can undergo the performances. So it can be due to clock and ephemeris errors, atmospheric delays, multipath interference from a satellite receiver pair. There can be ephemeris errors. So these are for a pair. These are the meters of error which can be drawn. So can you tell me what is the major factor which contributes to the highest error in GPS positioning? Answer is there in the slide. Anyone? Answer is there. Which factor contributes to the highest error in GPS? All agree? I think still people are in a doubt. So ephemeris causes up to 1 meter, satellite is up to 1 meter. So once you open your GPS map on your smartphone, can you see a big bubble with a location big bubble? Have you seen that? No? Yes? Yes? No? Yeah. So it means exactly your location can be somewhere in that bubble, right? So the biggest contributor is 5 to 40 meters. 40 meters is a huge error, isn't it so? So that is because of the presence of ionosphere. So this triggered us. Oh wow, we need to understand what is ionosphere first. Why it is making so much of noise in our life, right? So then the ultimate research starts. Okay, so this is the reverse process, right? So we have a technology which we are so much dependent, humans are so much dependent. Now we understood what is the major issue, because all our smartphones work on only single frequency GPS receivers. So the GPS sensors what we use today are single frequency. So and single frequency gets maximum of the error. But if you have dual frequency GPS like DGPS or kinetic GPS, then these errors will be negated and you will get only millimeters or centimeters of error. So the ultimate thing is, so what we understand? Ionospheric study. So we have to do ionospheric study, right? Then the ionization in the ionosphere should be regularly monitored to predict disturbances in GPS position. Hence a TEC map is developed which gives information about ionization at a particular location. So we have using these stations. So these are IGS station. IGS stands for International GNSS Service, which is provided across the globe. So from Bhutan, from Tibet to, so in Thailand we have one station, and Port Blair, Colombo, and from UKM we have 3 stations in Langkawi, Sarawak, and UKM itself. And so data from these stations will be taken to develop a near real-time map. So there are 3 outcomes which we have proposed in. It can be like analysis of TEC across the region using existing and collaborating network. So one of the agenda is we need to even expand or span out our wings to get more and more GPS stations to get the accuracy of the model higher. Then there are some already global models which are available like IRI and EQUID. Then we need to validate for our regional applications. Can we directly use any global model? Do you think so? No, right? Because all the global models have their own constraint when we apply them to regional space. So in this case, we are going to validate these models and characteristics of geomagnetic storms in low latitude and equatorial region. So these are the general characteristics of TE. So TEC. So what we have done, we have done this study from January 2015 to 2019. And then we have data segregation, archiving, scripting, and we could plot diagonal, seasonal, annual variation, and we can understand how TEC is being varying in a particular latitude or in a particular location. If we can understand the characteristics of the TEC. Okay, what is TEC? So I'm directly to the point. Total electron content means if you are standing at this point of time or point of location, how many electrons are present in a column of 1 cross 1 meter square. So that gives total electron content. So based on that, very simple, right? If total electron content is more, it means a signal or a satellite signal or a communication satellite signal which is transversing from the satellite to the ground-based receiver will tend to scintillate. We call the process called scintillation. Scintillation means the amplitude of the signal goes higher and there is a phase shift which happens due to presence of free ions in the ionosphere, due to which the GPS positioning errors are existed. So okay, this is the flow of how we process from Rhinus format of GPS station data to our tech values, TEC values. So we use GPS tech application software, which is again developed by in the previous slides I was showing project stakeholders were Indian Institute of Geomagnetism. So there is a scientist Gopi Simala who had developed this particular software. So we use his software which can be fed for which Rhinus data can be fed and we can get TEC values. So this is how the diagonal variation is. So this is like for a month we have averaged every hourly values, and then we can see during this particular time, say up to 6 to 12, the TEC value is maximum in all these months. So if we can compare, so this is the data for a particular station. So we can see this is a station from Bangalore for 2015. So TEC is average for the entire month, indicated by the red line. So this is the average for the month, and these are the min and maximum values for those particular days for entire month. So from this, what we can infer, the highest TEC is from 6 to 12. So this is one of the inference from this particular data. Okay, in this particular latent bound, in this particular station, TEC value is so. So at what time it is maximum? Then it also depends on the seasonal variation. So how seasonal variations are going to have impact TEC. So in seasonal, why they are seasonal variation? Because Earth is revolving around the sun, and for a year we have 4 seasons. Yes, we can say so. Yeah, so we can say so. There's summer, rainy, autumn, winter. But this may vary from country to country again. Because what I learned from city is rainy season is during the November to December here. So it is more rainy in this country in a different way. So similarly, we can also see how seasonally TEC being varying here at these points. So on an average, we can say TEC is higher during the summer months. So we call there are two types of summer, or we can say solstice and equinox. So equinox are the month wherein TEC values are much higher because of the presence of some summer months like February to April, and again from August to October. So these two are called equinox, and these two are called solstice months. So as we can see, yeah, so equinox months are much higher TEC than compared to during the solstice months. And also we can see this is the station of Hyderabad, which is towards the eastern part, the eastern coast of India. And similarly we have done for Tibet to Sri Lanka. So all top to bottom, all the stations which I have shown for India. Then also, okay, so this is the inference for what we got. So difference between the summer and autumn months is around 6 TEC, whereas for higher latitude it is 15 TEC. It means TEC variation is more impact in higher latitude compared to lower latitude stations. Then the solar cycle. Okay, because as we are studying about the sun, we are trying to understand the space weather. Then we need to understand how the sun behaves itself. So what we understand from over periods of the data, the sun has a typical cycle we call solar cycle. So it has solar maximum, solar minimum. Maximum means when the sun becomes so intense and there is so much of activity happening on the surface of the sun. So activity means, so it is creating so many sunspots. So when we call sunspot means they are the particular space on the surface of the sun which can eject solar flares and solar storm from there. So one way to track the solar cycle is by counting the number of sunspots. But it means if you have more number of sunspots, means more intense activity is going on the surface of this surface of the sun, and it can erupt so many solar flares and solar storms. And if it is a less sunspot, means solar minimum, and if it is high sunspot number, then it is a solar maximum. So the solar cycle affects the TEC in the atmosphere during the solar maximum. The TEC value increases, and during solar minimum, the TEC values decreases. So we also did our study from 2015 to 19. So this is called solar cycle 24. So we can see from this is the figure. So this is how the entire solar sunspot number which is being varying, and this is the average sunspot number. So we can see a cycle which is happening. So now we are somewhere here. So now this is a declining phase of our solar cycle. So it means our stations, if we try to plot TEC, the value of TEC should be higher in this area, and as we come near to 2020, the TEC value should be lesser, right? So we have to, okay, and if you can see, this is our data sets, and we are following the similar trend, right? From 2015, the TEC values were higher, and slowly it is coming down. So this is a perfect match, or the trend match for this solar cycle with our stations data. So this is done for Bangalore. So we have also done for other stations. So here you can see this is a Hyderabad station. So this is 15, 16, 17. You can see equinox very clearly. So equinox are the month in April to February to March to May, and here it is August to September. So this particular phase, it was thicker in 15. Then it is lighter, and so light. So very simple. We can even the anomaly of the TEC we can observe for the entire that particular station. So we have similarly plotted for all other stations too. So then there is another phenomenon called equatorial ionization anomaly. So Earth is moving eastward, right? So we have an electric force in the eastward direction, and also there is a magnetic force coming from north to south. So these two result in impact a resultant force which is outward and northward. So because of that, there is an intense anomaly which can be observed in the form of ionization crust, which can uplift the ionospheric plasma, and it pushes it downward toward the north and southern latitudes. So these latitude regions mostly plus or minus 15 to plus or minus 20 north, and plus or minus 15 to plus or minus 20 south. So if you can see, okay, now I will just give one small example of Thailand, wherein this is the AAT, one of the station, and this is Chiang Mai, which is near or more near to the northern latitude. So this is, so if you can see this phenomena, what we can observe, the values of TEC in Chiang Mai is much higher than compared to the values of TEC at AAT. As we go in the northernwards, because of this EI effect, the impact is more on northern stations. Now TC variations of AIT and Chiang Mai for Thailand side, so we have again calculated diurnal, monthly, seasonal, annual variations. So here we can see on an average, this is a month for 2011. So because of EI impact, we can clearly see the red colored lines are much higher values than the blue colored lines. So red colored lines are Chiang Mai, which is in the northern part, compared to AAT, which is in the equatorial region. So in this way, you can see entirely Chiang Mai data are much more than AAT data sets. And again, we have done from monthly comparisons of two stations. So these comparisons, why we are doing, because we want to see how latitudinally, how much TEC is differ, how much is the value or difference between the two TEC stations. So we can see maximum variations of 5 to 10 TEC at this particular areas. So then we can see every month how it varies from goes. So we can see during the equinox, slowly it goes higher, and then it slowly goes down, and then again in equinox, August and September, it goes to peak, and then it again goes down. So this entire phenomena we can observe through our data sets. Then also we have seasonal variations. So during the seasons, how these two stations are comparing and how they are reacting to each other. So here we can see the intensity was much more in Chiang Mai, which is the northern station, compared to Bangkok, which is in equatorial region. Similarly, annual variation. So we have done this for last 2 years, in 2011 and 2012 at the time. So it is more on, we can see 2011, the values were less, and 2012 it was more, because the solar cycle was 23 at that time. The peak was going higher at 2012. So again, now come to latitudinal variation. So now we can understand how EIE functions, right? So we want to validate how it literally works with our station's information. So we can see in a geographic latitude from 0 to say 25. So around 15 plus or minus 15 to plus or minus 20. This is the most impactful area. So if we can see from 2015 it was reddish, then slowly it is becoming greener. So the intensity of TEC was much more in 15 to 18, which again coincides with our solar cycle. And then now, as I told you, so there are some global models which are ionospheric from IRA 2016 to NEQUIC models. Okay, I have to tell one small story about this. You know who made IRA? Any idea? Who developed IRA? Actually, it is from US. So NASA is the one who made, and NEQUIC is done by ICTP. Basically, they are from European Space Agency. So basically, in the world there are two big agencies. One is NASA and another is European Space Agencies. And one model was IRA was given from NASA, and NEQUIC has been developed by ICTP, International Center for Theoretical Physics, which is under European Space Agency. And then what we have done, we have totally automated the process to retrieve the values from TEC values from these models and to correlate with our own station informations. So now, okay, this is the web model from International Reference Ionosphere, from where we can we can input some information to which we want to get TEC. So mostly we depend on the year, month, time, and the coordinates of that particular station, and then we can select which particular height range we want to choose, and then we can get TEC value. And these are the optional input where we can have a sunspot number, and then a radio flux, an upper boundary if you want to give. And then similarly we have NEQUIC model 2, which is upgraded version of NEQUIC 1. And then what we found is there are almost 90% trend was quite okay, but it was correlation was up to 90%, 80 or so, 90.5, 91, so forth. So on an average, TEC data obtained from 6 GNS stations. So we have compared to all the GNS stations in India, and the values were found to be 90% similar. And with NEQUIC, we can say was again more than 90. So compared to these two, we can say NEQUIC was more better for our area than to IRI. Then also we can see the modal validation of GPS tag and IRA and NEQUIC. So we can see because I can see India and Malaysia is somewhere here, right? So, so Malaysia is almost equal to India.
First, you can get until 60%.
Oh,
So that's why CT working on this one, try to get Malaysian model.
Oh, good. Then I think once we compare with US and also with Thai, then we'll have more clarity about this part. Okay, so this is how we can also compare the more models, and we can see. And also, it was okay. NEQUIC model was done by ICTP, right? So ICTP scientists have done model performance based on the deviations. So we also calculate deviation using this particular equation, and then we can see how much deviated both IRA and NEQUIC models are. So we have done for two major strokes. One is 215 and 219 because that was the peak and 2019 was the lowest. Then also we have variation from this is from the Thailand stations and compared to IRI. So we can see how this is being varying. So seasonal variation and entire year. So if you can find some of the gap data, so because of the data outages. So characteristics of geomagnetic storms. Okay, so as we were talking about solar flares, so as of now we understood two important factors. One was how TEC characteristics are at this particular stations or in this particular area. Second thing, we try to understand, okay, there is some global models, we try to validate them. And third thing is we want to understand how geomagnetic storms are going to impact TEC. So then for any particular, as we already know, all these stories which I already talked about in the starting of the presentation. So because of all these phenomena, we have interplanetary magnetic field which we need to understand, and distance, storm time. Okay, so if you can see from here, so there is a particular event which occurred in 2012 in March. So in March, so interplanetary magnetic field turned to minus 4.4 when CME exploded from the sun surface on 7th of March, and this CME hit our magnetic field around Earth magnetic field around 6:30 UT, and then the TEC comparatively you can see in TEC it was literally gone higher and it went to up and then slowly came down. Similarly in TEC of Chiang Mai also it went to up and then it came down. So you can see these values 60, 61, 72, 73. These are the sudden upliftment in the TEC or TEC enhancement due to these geomagnetic storms. And for this particular data analysis, we need to understand the sunspot number, how were there, because see, we can see sunspot number were highest, which causes the wind speed higher and which causes the IMF negative, and it exploded on 7. So this is a straightforward equation where we can correlate how things from the sun surface can cause eruption and then it can impact TEC. So as we can see in the same case, we have compared two stations. So TEC depletions were occurred in these cases, and also nighttime enhancement at the night from these two stations. So similarly, we have done for other cases in 2011 to 12. Then okay, so recently we have done for 14 March to 2050, so with a 1 hour resolution. So what we have done, we have compared 3 stations data with DST index. Okay, DST index is another major index through which we can also define the region occurrence of storm. So usually DST index tends to at 0. If suddenly downward towards more than minus 200, then it is an indication there is a sudden commencement of the geomagnetic storms. And these blue line indicates sudden commencement, and the red line represent the main phase, and the green line represent the recovery. So slowly the disturbances which have occurred on our magnetic field are getting recovered. So we can see in Lucknow there is too much of low TEC happening, and this is due to the dusk effect which happens post sunset at this particular stations. And also if we can see in other 2 stations, the TEC was increased so because of TEC enhancement, and then there was, so it will take almost 1 to 2 days to get over and to become again normal as the early 2 geomagnetic storms. So okay, so these are the further steps where these are the activities still what we can do as of now. And the further step, we need to evaluate GPS positioning errors, so how much GPS error we are going to get during that particular geomagnetic storm. So how much of meters of error, it can be 5 meters, 10 meters or so. And then we need to, we are in the verge of making near real-time tech mapping. I hope by April or May in this year, we will be able to come up with our own portal, wherein every one of us can access through your smartphone that how much of TEC maps are being done. And we are also making a data visualization system for monitoring near real-time tech across the region. So these are the sample plots which we have done for GPS. So this is a trailer. No? So upcoming presentation, we are going to put up these things. So there is a solar event in from Indian Institute of Science from Bangalore, and then we can compare how much of error is happening. So we can see during this is a peak time. We have observed up to 6 meters of the error in east-west direction, and up to more than or 5 around in north-south. So okay, these are the plots which we intend to make for all our countries, so even for Malaysia and India. So we have already done during the event how this is every 2 hours plot on that particular event day. So we can see very peculiarly, so this is the impact which was more on Chiang Mai side compared to the station in the AIT. So we have done interpolation techniques to get these maps of how the impact are being at various stages. So these are our final TEC project. This is our perspective. So we are going to build something like this. Wherein we are going to showcase Asian region, India and Asian countries, and also why we are interested in producing these final tech products, because we can say if there is a 10 TEC units, 1.62 meters of error is happening at that point of time. If you can come to know what is real-time tech, if you can just find in your smartphone that what is the TEC value at this point of time at this particular region, you can immediately tell, okay, what is the TEC. So if you are staying somewhere here, you can say, okay, it is around 50 to 60. Accordingly, you can negate that much of positioning error, and then you can calculate for your real-time applications. So if you are like, this is for Australia, this is for US, and this is for Europe. And there are only 5 countries which have made such TEC maps in the world: US, Europe, China, Australia, and Japan. And 6th will be all of us. So India and Malaysia and Thailand. We are 3 countries will be doing for the ASEAN region. So this we had a meeting in AIT with UN because UN International Civil Aviation Organization is a part of this particular project. So we are going to meet them in April in this year. So we have conducted a workshop, and this was from US Air Force Asian Office of Air Force Research and Development, which we held in AIT. So you know this, right? So okay, so coming back to so up to this, so I was talking about the project, what I have done so far in this particular contest. So it was this project where we are doing with AIT Thailand and UKM, and then I'm also doing another project which is on service-oriented participatory platform for local SDS smart civic services for 2-tier cities from Thailand and India. So it is also international cooperation of bilateral scheme for Thailand and Government of India. So we are IIT Bombay, from Indian side. We and IIT Bombay are partners in this project, and we have 2 other Thai institutes for this project. I am co-PI for that project, and what we are doing for that project, I just wanted to give a glimpse because most of you from GIS. Okay, so the idea is there are bins, right? So waste bins. So can we get the information how much our waste bin is filled? If it is empty, half filled, or more than 70%, or it is totally filled. Based on this information, there will be dynamic routing of the waste collection bins basically. So usually the idea is every morning a truck comes and it collects the garbage from various locations and it dumps into the yard, right? So in this project, what we are going to put IoT sensors, and we can get the real-time information of these bin wastage levels, and based on that, dynamic routing can be done for the vehicles. And similarly, we are also doing emergency services and road monitoring. So if there is a road condition is not so well at the particular area, so we can get those information. There are 2 ways. So one is we have built an inbuilt app wherein you can use your bike or your car and you can get the information based on the vibrations your car will feel, and that data can be mapped into to find out how is the road conditions of that particular area. And if there is some emergency applications like accident or so it can be routed to what is the best road to reach a particular hospital. So it is basically a GIS application. So this particular project is to make front end, back end, and middlewares. This is another consultancy project which we are doing for TomTom India. So as I was saying you, right, TomTom, right, from the starting slide. So what we are doing for TomTom, so we are 85 students are with this project. So we are validating their maps. So every day you have Grab taxi which you use or Uber you use, right? So every day there are some new roads which are coming, or new bridges being built, or new societies which are being built, new apartments which are being built. So that data is not updated so frequently to our maps, right? So what we are doing, we used to validate them. So if a car driver enters into a new society or a new area, which road data is not there in our maps, existing maps, this new data will generate a lead to us, wherein our team digitize these maps, they validate these maps, they edit the maps, and they align and shift according to the needs. And we keep on updating their maps, which will be catered to Uber. So Uber uses the TomTom map across the globe. For those maps, we are validating them. So these are some other examples where we have various shapes and various areas across the globe we used to get, and we validate them. So even we can sometimes get a new area inside the city. So this road is not with the database we used to. We had to draw them. We had to edit them. Thank you so much. I'm on time. 11. Yeah. So if you have any queries, you can ask me.